April 1st. Okay, so this is our agenda for today. Dre is going to talk about evaluation. Blessing is going to talk about administrative management. Yoli and I are going to talk about fiscal management, and Jim is going to talk about operational management. These are the current staff assignments. So you probably already know who your grant manager is, but if not, here they are. So I'm going to pass it over to Drea now to talk about evaluation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea Smith, but most of you know me as Drea. I review the data from the quarterly progress reports, so I'm going to talk a little about that. Quarterly progress reports are due 30 days after the end of each fiscal quarter. There are 3 parts: the grant project summary, or the GPS, the material data summary, also called the progress report, and the CCC signage review Excel document. The GPS is for reporting on progress towards achieving your objectives and key activities. You provide a brief comment under each key activity each quarter, and the progress report is used to report the success of your collection program. The progress reports are useful as a program management tool. Reviewing your GPS and progress report regularly will keep your core focus on your objectives. We're looking for positive outcomes and increased collection numbers, but also report on what didn't work. If you're new to writing these reports, review the previous quarterly reports and cycle ending reports as examples. These reports were reviewed and approved, so they make good models to follow, and always consult with your grant manager if you have questions. As a reminder, your report is to be in final form when submitted to CalRecycle, so please review and edit carefully. All right, reporting requirements. When submitting your quarterly reports, be sure to upload both the GPS and progress report under the Reports tab, you see it circled on the picture here, as well as the CCC signage review spreadsheet, even if you didn't complete any reviews during that quarter. Using this information, I create quarterly reports as well as the annual report. So let's look at data from last fiscal year. So the visuals in the slideshow show the total beverage container collection by core fiscal year 24-25 and a comparison to the previous fiscal year. Beverage collection totaled over 4.1 million pounds, nearly reaching the 2.1 million collected last fiscal year, but that was with 14 cores. So even with only 13, we still reached nearly the same amount as the previous. And then we have tires. In this chart, the total tire collection shown from fiscal year 24-25 with a comparison to the previous fiscal year. Over 142,000 tires were collected, surpassing the about 114,000 from the last fiscal year. So just keep getting better. And then e-waste. We see e-waste collection as compared to the last fiscal year again. Collection totaled nearly 3.1 million pounds, which is an increase from the previous fiscal year, which was about 3.1 million. And of course, our CCC signage reviews. Last year, cores were able to complete 100% of the reviews, totaling 1,639 reviews. So congratulations. Just a couple reminders on the progress report. So for the e-waste collection numbers, please identify the data as either an estimated volume or the volume took from CWIS. Use the abbreviation indicated in the report as an E for an estimate or a C for confirmed. And then once you have confirmed the final amount, update the E to a C in the next report. Of course, fourth quarter data will be considered final. If changes are made to a previous quarter, please indicate that somehow by putting like an asterisk or a note below the table. And then one new update, we've updated the education and outreach table and removed the boxes to check for which event types were like used or were supported at each event. To make reporting more consistent, we want to have everybody report based on the location of the event. So for example, that means if you went to an event that was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but it was at one location, you just set up, stayed there all weekend, and then tore down, that would be one event. However, if you go to a farmer's market every Saturday for 8 weeks, that could be 8 separate events because you're setting up and tearing down every weekend. I also had a question about the tire drop off and the e-waste events. If you're also providing education and outreach to those events, you can list them here as well. And unless there's any questions, I'll be passing it along to Blessing to go over grant administration.
Thank you, Drea. Good morning, everyone. My name is Blessing Badmus, and I'll be going over the administrative section of this presentation, which consists of the cycle documents, the grant agreements, insurance, external audits, contacts, as well as change of address. Next slide, please. The cycle documents were emailed to you at the point of signing the grant agreements, and these documents explain the proper procedures for compliance grant agreement. Exhibit A, which is the terms and condition, is the controlling document. So if anything in Exhibit B says something different, Exhibit A will apply. It is the responsibility of the staff to know your contract, so please review as often as you can. Next slide, please. Recently, your corps signed a grant agreement, and by signing the grant agreement, each corps agrees to everything in the cover sheets, the Exhibit A, B, and C. Also, by signing the grant agreement, the corps agrees to the approved budget and the grant project summary, which explains the award and how the funds will be used. Next slide, please. Insurance. You're required to obtain insurance certificates and submit them to your grant manager. There are 3 different insurance policies. The first 2, the commercial general liability and the auto liability, is 1 million. The third is workers' compensation insurance and should meet the state of California statutory requirements. If your corps is self-insured, you must provide a certificate of consent to self-insure. More details can be found in the grant's terms and conditions. Please send insurance certificates to your grant manager by email. Next slide, please. External annual audits. An external annual audit is required and is due by April 30th for each cycle. Derek, the sound is still on. Thank you. So an external audit is required and is due by April 30th of each cycle, unless you have prior approval to extend this timeline. When sending the audits to your grant manager, please include the name of the specific auditor who conducted it, not just the firm. A new auditor must be assigned every 6 years, which is tracked by CalRecycle. Next slide, please. Here is a sample of an audit letter. The audit letter is a required part of the audit report. It must be signed by the auditor and include both the auditor's name and the name of the auditing firm. The audit guidelines were included in your award email. Next slide, please. CalRecycle audit process. Each year, CalRecycle randomly selects a few calls to audit. The process begins with an engagement letter from the auditor, followed by an on-site audit. These audits review past cycles, so it's important to maintain organized records to avoid findings. To prepare, keep all financial records for each cycle for at least 3 years after the cycle ends. These includes original receipts, personnel records showing timesheets by material fund, documents submitted for reimbursements. Keeping organized records ensures a smooth audit process. After the audit, the on-site audit, the auditor will hold an exit meeting to share a summary of the results and issue a final audit draft. You will have 30 days to respond to any findings that you believe are incorrect and submit relevant documentation to support your case. Once the review is complete, the auditor will issue the final audit report, and at that point, all findings are considered final and officially closed. Next slide, please. Contacts. Please be reminded that only contacts who need access should be in GMS. Please keep your contacts in GMS up to date. If there are any changes, please sign into GMS and make the necessary updates. Remember that anyone with access to the grant application in GMS can make changes, but you cannot make changes to the signature authority or designated authority contacts. To update these contacts, please contact your grant manager. And if you don't know who your grant manager is, their contact information is available in GMS. Although at this point, I'm sure everybody knows who their grant manager is. Next slide, please. Change of address. If your payment mailing address changes, you must complete a new payee data record form so we can update the address in our system. And that's it for my section of this presentation. Next, I will pass this to Derek for fiscal overview. Thank you.
Thanks, Blessing. So I'm going to go over part of this section and then Yoli will take over. So these are the topics. I won't read through them, but we're going to go through all of this as part of this section. So we'll go on to financial overview. Very important point for everybody who has any responsibility for the funds from CalRecycle. You hold a very high fiscal responsibility for public funds. All funds are only to be expended for the public benefit. Contracts and purchases must take into the consideration the concept of arm's length transactions. So that's one of the reasons we will go over the bid process. But in all transactions, please uphold the highest standards in terms of not granting contracts to friends, family, or other people in favor of that relationship. Funds awarded to you are not to be treated as private funds. CalRecycle funds are not simply awarded. They're entrusted to your organization, and this requires a high level of accountability in order to maintain the public's trust. This is just a quick overview of the funding for RLC40. Almost $30 million this year. Add some heft to the idea of public trust. There's quite a almost 30 million reasons the public is entrusting this funding to the local corps to do their work. Advances. Several of you, I think 5, took advances this cycle. If your previous advance is 100% reconciled, if you have signed the advance acknowledgement letter and returned it to your grant manager, and if you owe CalRecycle no other funds, any kind of debt like a past due payment, repayment of an advance or something like that, or a finding of an audit, then you are ready for an advance. So remember that the if you took an advance in RLC39, it has to be fully reconciled. So please request the advance before requesting a reimbursement. If you start reimbursing before you get your advance, then all it does is increase the amount that we need to withhold to reconcile the advance throughout the rest of the cycle. So your cash flow gets squeezed and makes life difficult. You may reconcile the advance early. So if you're close to the end of RLC39 and you don't want to wait until your invoices reconcile that advance, you can pay it off and then you can get your RLC40. About 25% of the total reimbursement requested will be applied to the unreconciled balance from each invoice. Management of advance funds may be critical to your cash flow throughout the cycle, and no withhold is taken from the advance. And I got an extra A in my advance there. Payment requests. So we operate in the state under what's called the Prompt Payment Act. It's a law that requires the state to pay within 45 days. So we have 45 days to process invoices and get a check out. That's if there's no errors. If there are errors, then grant managers can pause the clock, and it slows down the process. So the cleaner your invoices, the faster you get paid. And most of you do a great job of that. In fact, all of you do a great job on that most of the time. So please be sure your backup is all proper and orderly and correct. Grant managers have about 15 of the 45 days to review and approve the invoice if there are no hiccups and questions. Payment requests are uploaded to GMS by you. They're to be submitted to CalRecycle every 30 days. If you're not doing that, we really do request that you improve on that and try to get those put together every 30 days. 10% of the approved amount of each invoice is withheld. That total withhold will be released after the approval of your final report. Payment requests may be held if progress reports are late. Okay. Bid requirements. This is critical, folks. Auditors take careful look at this whenever they audit your core. So please pay close attention to this. You must have 3 bids or quotes in writing for any expense to the grant that's charging the grant $5,000 or more. The bids and quotes have to be for like items. So if you're buying a pickup truck and you're targeting a Chevy Silverado, then they have to be 3 bids or quotes for Chevy Silverados. So have to be for like items. Must be current. So don't collect them in October 25 and then submit them for a purchase in October 26, or your grant manager will not accept them. And lowest bid must be taken, or your reimbursement will be limited to the lowest bid amount. Your grant manager may also require that you submit your bids for a pre-review before you make a purchase over $5,000. So make sure you know what your grant manager expects. Sole source. So once in a while, we get a request from a core to pay for something that would normally require bids that they want to purchase from a particular company. And there may be very valid reasons for doing so. It may be a very unique product or service that you can't get anywhere else. Nobody else makes it. Nobody else in your area can provide the service, whatever the case may be. But grant manager pre-approval is required for a sole source. So you need to email your grant manager with a detailed request explaining what's going to be purchased and the specifics of the rationale for needing to execute a sole source purchase. Failure to obtain pre-approval may result in denial of all or part of the costs incurred. So it's really important that you guys pay attention to that, please.
And Derek, before you go on, we do have a
Yep.
question.
Oh, okay. What's the
Yeah,
question?
you guys, this is Robert with LA Corp. I can save my questions to the end, but do you guys want us to answer questions as they come up or just tuck them
It's
away?
absolutely fine to post questions as they come up.
Okay, so I'll just
Yep.
rattle the 3 that I had. The
Okay.
GMF moving to Chris, is the historic data going to get moved over to Chris as well?
Yes.
Okay, question number 2 with regard to LLC1. So you have to have invoice in hand by April 1st.
Correct.
So that really means the performance period ends in January.
Depends on what you're doing, but possibly yes.
Okay. And then the 3 bids, especially for vehicles, are you saying we have like-minded means same make and model, or can a core, if they're trying to buy a vehicle, can they look at Ford F-150, a Ram Tradesman, as long as they have equal, or are you locked into literally having to just get bids on the same model?
No, you don't really need the same brand, but if you're looking at 3/4 ton trucks, then you should submit bids for 3/4 ton trucks, not 1/2 ton and 2 3/4 tons. But yeah,
2
I should have,
diesel, 1 gas, so forth and so on.
right.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense than how I originally heard it. Thank you.
Yeah, I probably didn't state it clearly. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. Any other questions right now? All right. So, sole source, real important, pre-approval, and it won't be approved for something that's commonly available, like web services or something like that. So be sure to bring forward something that's unique and difficult to source elsewhere. Okay, other required pre-approvals, a change to the grant project summary. If you need to change an objective or key activity, you want to add it or subtract it, you need to work with your grant manager on that. Budget modifications need to be submitted and approved. That's if you're adding or removing a line item in the budget, moving funds across budget categories. Okay, remember, if you're just moving funds within budget categories to existing line items, you don't need pre-approval for that. Printing or publishing new grant-funded education, outreach, and marketing print or web materials. So anything you're going to put out to the public with our funds needs to be run through us. We often have to also run it through our Office of Public Affairs. So give us some lead time because it can take a week or two sometimes for OPA to look things over. Out of state travel not included in your application budget. If you're going to the national core conference, hopefully you're putting that into your budget when you submit your application for 41, and then it's part of your approved budget. You don't need any other approvals from us for that. But if you plan any other state travel that's not in your approved budget, you need to get written approval from your grant manager for that. Okay, budget modification requires grant manager approval, involves moving money from one category to another, involves adding or deleting a line item, and also involves adding a capital expense $5,000 or greater that is not included in the approved GPS. So if you decide, hey, we've got some extra money, we need to buy a new pickup, we're going to move money around to make that happen, you need to get approval, and that is a budget modification. Budget adjustment, no pre-approval is required, involves moving money within a category from one line item to another, existing line items, and does not meet any of the budget modification criteria. Backup, really important in order for us to meet the 45-day prompt payment period and for you to get promptly paid. So we carefully review everything that you submit to us. So the proof of purchase and payment must match your general ledger. If you're charging part of an invoice to us, then you should note on there how much is being charged to the grant. Backup must be provided for purchases of $1,000 or more from a single purchase or from multiple purchases from the same vendor during the expenditure period. So if you're billing us for January and you have 3 invoices to Home Depot for $400, then you're going to have to provide the backup for that because that'll add up to more than $1,000. So you provide an invoice, a receipt, or a purchase order. Proof of payment may include everything listed there. Personnel records, a simple summary showing staff names, hours, and payment amounts by material fund. All timesheet records are not necessary. And proof of payment for the personnel. So if you use a payment vendor who does all your payments for you, then you can just provide us their documentation. Travel we'll cover on another slide, and indirect costs. If you're using a federal indirect cost rate, no backup is required. Be sure that you are providing the most up-to-date copy of your FICR to your grant manager. Those time out every year or two, and so I know that you have to get a new one. Be sure that the most current one, or the current one, is on file in GMS with your grant manager. Cost allocation plan, if you're operating under that, then you must submit a ledger of indirect expenses, but you do not need to provide backup for those. Just a detailed ledger so we can see what's being charged and compare it to your cost allocation plan. Eligible versus ineligible costs. So just big picture, eligible costs must be directly related to your grant project summary, included in your approved budget workbook, and must be reimbursement of paid costs. So we, aside from the advance, the rest of the payments that you'll receive are all reimbursement. And eligible costs, any costs not specifically in the approved budget and not directly related to the local Conservation Corps grant program, and not directly related to the approved grant project summary. Common invoice errors that we see: missing workers' comp proof of payment. I don't know why that one's a blind spot for so many people, but be sure to include proof of payment for that. Travel backup errors. It's complicated. We get it. It's complicated for us too if we get to travel. So work with your grant manager if you have questions. Misallocation of costs to the wrong material fund. Using a name or address that is different than the grant agreement. Be sure to check that grant agreement. There's a space on there where it says you want your checks mailed. It gives a name and address for the organization and the address. So make sure that what's on your Form 87 is the same as what's on your grant agreement. Uploading payment request documents in the reports tab in GMS, that doesn't work. Backup doesn't match the general ledger. That's going to create a lot of back and forth, a lot of emails. So make sure your backup matches. Make sure the backup is within the expenditure period. So if you're billing for February, but you've got something that you forgot, or you got paid a little later in January and you want to include it, that's fine. Just expand your expenditure period on the Form 87 to include January. So it would be a January-February invoice and not just a February invoice. Bid process wasn't followed. Big problem. We've had to deny some payments, and if we have to do that, the most you're going to get is $4,999, and that can be a big hit on your budget. Budget workbook changed retroactively, formulas altered, or the wrong version is used. We do our best to correct formula errors when we find them. One at a time. As the budget workbooks come in with an invoice, we'll make changes to those and send them back out to you so that you have the most current version. So filing on your side is probably really important on those, just to make sure that you use the most current version, because things do come up and formulas we find errors in our process, and we find errors in things being changed sometimes. So make sure you've got the most current one. Data entry errors, that happens. Final invoice and end of cycle report. So all RLC40 costs must be incurred before June 30th of 2027. Final report is due 60 calendar days after the final invoice, no matter when it's submitted. And both are due by no later than August 30th, 2027, if your final invoice comes in on June 30th. So when you submit that final invoice, you can start the clock ticking at 60 calendar days. 10% withhold. It's released when your final report is approved. After we've received your final invoice and the final report is approved, then we will automatically release those funds, so you don't have to request them. Travel. This got a little more complicated a year ago. It improved in some ways and made it a little bit more complicated in others. But the good news is that the rates went up. So we're using federal rates now instead of the old state rates for reimbursement. So the meal rates, we're using the base rates for the feds. The feds have some differentials that we're not using for meals. So you'll see at the bottom of this slide, the meal rates, those are fixed. The per diem rates, so that is the total that you can charge for the day. So if, let's say you go away for 4 days, your first day, you can charge a maximum of $51 per day. And your last day of travel, your 4th day, you can charge a maximum of $51. The 2 middle days, the 2nd and 3rd days, you can charge a maximum of $68 per day for the per diem. So you can charge up to $16 for lunch, or $16 for breakfast, $19 for lunch, $28 for dinner, and then incidentals, which are generally tipping, hotel staff, things like that, $5. So your total per diem consists of those 4 different kinds of charges, and you can charge up to those maximums for those items. Okay. Be sure to keep all of your receipts for all of that. You don't need to turn them into us for meals, but you need to have them on file in case audit asks for them. All right, and the hotels, those rates vary, and there's a website linked there that you can go to try to figure out what rate you can charge, because especially tourist areas, they have various rates that you can charge through the year. So if you're there during a high tourist time, the rate will be higher and drops during the slow periods in the year. All right, I'm going to hand this off to Yoli. You're probably tired of hearing from me at this point anyway. So Yoli, take it away.
All right, thank you. As I edit this. All right, thank you, Derek. And hello, everyone. My name is Yoli Park, and I am the one that tries to ensure a complete and ready budget workbook for the beginning of the cycle, and who does fixes during the cycle when it's not perfect. So, Derek, next slide, please. All right, the budget workbook you should be using for the cycle should be the final approved version. So if you had to make any changes during the application period, you will have worked with your grant manager to finalize your budget workbook, and you'll have received a final copy once approved. If you're unsure, just reach out to your grant manager. When you're ready to submit your first invoice, be sure to fill out the grant number on the budget tab of the budget workbook. A lot of times we get these back and it hasn't been filled out. So we want to make sure that that entry is made. And if you're not sure about your grant number, please check GMS. Please do not change existing formulas do not add formulas, and do not delete formulas. And yes, we have received budget workbooks where this has been done when grantees accidentally receive an unlocked budget workbook. So please also do not copy and paste into the budget workbook. And you need to hard code your numbers by entering them in manually. And we found instances where copy and pasting has led to numerical discrepancies and rounding errors. So please don't copy and paste, just enter it in. And please also do not retroactively change amounts on either the budget tab or the invoice tab. We've also seen this happen. And when this happens, you are changing what has been approved, and it will cause errors and inaccuracies in the summary table, and it will deviate from what GMS is showing. So doing these kinds of changes, all of the ones that I have mentioned, affects the integrity of the budget workbook and the matchability with GMS. So it can cause major budgeting problems down the line if it's not caught early enough. Fixing the budget workbook when there's issues, it can take a day or several, depending on the problem and how much that problem compounded. So it takes investigating and cross-checking with all prior invoices with GMS and with CalRecycle's own accounting logs. So although I absolutely do this willingly, it does take time away from reviewing my own invoices and getting through my own workload. So again, please don't make changes to add or delete formulas, and don't make retroactive changes. If ever you need to make a change or make a correction, you notice something that maybe you overcharge, undercharge, whatever, please just reach out to your grant manager first. If things aren't adding up correctly, and I make those mistakes as well, just please reach out to your grant manager before you attempt fixes. Next slide, please. So when requesting an advance, enter the amounts on the invoice tab where it says, if you are requesting an advance, enter amounts here. And then please try to make the advance your first invoice for the cycle if you are requesting one. It helps the average repayment of your advance to stay low on the remaining invoices, as Derek mentioned earlier. And if you request it after the first invoice, make sure that that is CalRecycle, recalculates the workbook to ensure that the amount is fully calculated to be paid back by the time of your last payment request. Although the repayment amount is automatically calculated, you'll still need to manually enter in the amount. Please do not input formulas. And if you must, go only 2 places past the decimal. This ensures budget workbook integrity and matchability with GMS. Also note, if for some reason you need to go back and change a prior amount on your budget workbook for an invoice that's already been paid, again, reach out to your grant manager. The repayment calculation would be affected, and because we cannot make retroactive changes, any corrections would have to be done on a current that is being currently reviewed or a future invoice. Next slide, please. The invoice tab shows an advanced summary table, and in order to ensure the table is activated, be sure to select yes from the drop-down menu located on the left corner of the invoice tab. This will ensure the formulas in the advanced summary table are on. And because the default is no, if you're not taking an advance, you won't need to select anything. Next slide, please. On the invoice tab, when submitting an invoice, be sure to enter the actual date the payment request is to be submitted. This should match GMS, and the expenditure period dates, which should match the dates on Form 87 as well. There's an added piece to this Cycle's budget workbook, which is a question of adjustments. Because this budget workbook does not currently have a more obvious way of showing adjustments, you'll need to check mark the box if any were made. So how to do an adjustment? Let's go over that on the next slide. To start, adjustments do not need prior approval. And so to add an adjustment, enter in the amount you are adding or subtracting to the original amount you entered at the time of application. Do not erase the original amount. Just enter an addition or subtraction. You'll need to make sure to add the equal sign before the original amount, then a plus or minus sign, then the amount you are either adding or subtracting. Press enter and it will calculate automatically for you. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to your grant manager. Next slide, please. A budget modification needs prior approval from your grant manager. And so you'll submit an email detailing your reasons why you need it. Include the budget workbook with the requested amounts and the description in the corresponding line. What you see on the screen is a very simplified idea. Obviously, you'll have a proper description in the application row, and this budget would be completely filled out. But hopefully this conveys the idea. As you make your changes, ensure that the material funding allocations do not change by checking the last row and the top of the page. If there's a mismatch, the word review will show in red at the top. Also, check the summary table on the invoice tab in case your changes accidentally move too much and leave you with overspending in your budget items. Do not enter formulas. Again, please do not do this into the budget modification cells and try to use whole numbers as much as possible. If you must go past the decimal, please only go 2 digits past. And again, all of these things, I know it sounds restrictive, but all of it helps to ensure that the allocation totals do not change, and it ensures accuracy in conjunction with the budget workbook formulas and GMS. Next slide, please. Okay, so to recap, budget adjustments are tracked in the cells and modifications are tracked in the designated budget modification rows. Bud mods need pre-approval and they need to be submitted before the payment request, not at the same time. Submitting both at the same time delays the review of the payment request because the budget modification needs to be reviewed and approved before you can use that budget workbook for your payment request. A budget modification is whenever you are moving more than 5,000 between line items, creating a new line item, or deleting a line item, or if you are making a change to the grant project summary objectives in which a budget change is needed. Please remember that material fund balances awarded cannot be changed. You cannot move money between material funds. All money must stay within the material fund in which it was allocated. In other words, you can move monies vertically in the columns. You cannot move monies horizontally across the rows. And that's it on my end. If there are no questions, I'll pass it on to Jim. Thanks.
There we go. Good morning, everybody. So I'll be covering the operational management and a couple new things in here and review of some of the operational components of the 4 different grant funds. Next slide, please. So site visits will be arranged by your grant manager as allowed by the state. Sometimes we are not allowed to go depending on budget constrictions, but in recent years, we've been allowed to meet in person. That can change at any time. If we're not able to meet in person, we'll arrange to meet virtually. When we're able to meet in person, grant managers try to arrange multiple sessions in one visit. We often are visiting 2 to 3, sometimes even 4 cores in one overall visit. You should receive an online form to fill out. It may feel redundant since it can be sent around the time of as your reports, but it helps the grant managers to have a summary to use when needing to reference the more in-depth reports. Agenda items include an overview of the grant cycle, the budget workbook, and future planning. Next slide, please. Outreach and marketing. This was mentioned before, but be sure that your grant manager receives any new outreach and marketing materials for review and approve. They will forward those to me and I approve them, making sure that they're in line with what is necessary. You do not need to recognize CalRecycle materials on your bottles and cans, waste tires, and e-waste, but you do need to include the used oil drop sign that you see there, and you can include the CalRecycle logo, or you will also need to include the CalRecycle logo on the used oil literature. There's no gifts of public funds, which means you cannot use the grant to purchase swag or freebie handout things when you're conducting your educational events. Next slide, please. So mentioned also reliable contractor declaration. If you're hiring a consultant or someone to work on directly related programs or a project that will be reimbursed by the grant. For example, like a tire hauler contractor to do improvements on facilities, training, module developments, that's when you need a reliable contractor declaration. You do not need to use or have a reliable contractor declaration when goods that will be charged to operating cost or indirect cost, hiring someone to provide services related to administrative reports, administrative support, such as copy machines, maintenance, IT services, and the like, services that are charged under indirect unless these would qualify as doing program or project work. So those do not need a reliable contractor declaration. Please send a copy of that to your grant manager and also upload to GMS under the reports tab. There's a place there in the reports tab where you can upload that. So if you have a standard contracting process, make sure that suggestion is to have that reliable contractor declaration form as part of your standard contracting forms. That way you'll be sure that it enters into that process. Ensure that all contracts and agreements are arm's length. Derek went into that. No personal interest or family interest in any contract. It's a violation of state ethics and it can result in an audit finding. Okay, next slide, please. All program guides were updated in 2024, and I'm looking at doing an update on the tires because there's some information that was not put in there regarding cleaning up tires from waterways, as well as working with native lands. So I want to add that and have that in there as guidelines for you. These guidelines are not only for you guys, program managers, supervisors, but it's also your training materials for anybody being promoted or higher into those positions. It's also great for the executive directors to know what you guys have to do to make these programs run. And if there are questions that come up, by all means, certainly reach out to me. I've made these guides specifically targeted to your programs. And there's links to the, CalRecycle websites. The CalRecycle websites are very vast. They address a lot of different audiences and users. So these guides are more honed in on what you need for running your programs. Okay. And it's also great to refresh your knowledge base, as time goes on. But please be sure to reach out to your grant manager or to myself if you have questions. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, back up one moment. I'm sorry. So at this website, calrecycle.ca.gov funding, you will find the program guides that can be downloaded. You will also find the training for the Universal Waste Safety Training, required trainings for your e-waste programs required under DTSC. There's two different trainings, the safe handling and the emergency training. And there's also Spanish language. This is an older slide. I think this is not updated, but there's Spanish language information there for that. So yeah, and there's a POD webinar. It's in the YouTube file. It talks about the PODs. In each of the guides, there are contacts that you can reach out to directly to those material programs. And feel free to do that. If you want to bypass me, that's okay with me. They're the persons who actually would be the ones you would normally call, but I've always filled this role due to my own background. But someday, eventually, I won't be here, so you'll need to contact those people directly. All right, next slide. So the DOR, Department of Recycling, is your guide for all things for beverage container recycling. On the left of this web page that you see here is key resources. It's linked to the laws and regulations and gives you the guidelines on running your program. This program has been the founding program for the local Corps, local conservation corps. It's now in its 40th year. It's good to go back and look at what's here because things have changed and are continuing to change as CalRecycle rolls out new programs to shore up our bottle and can recycling, CRV redemptions, and the like. There are certification renewals for your recycling center. There is also training for some of the other different certifications that you may need to run your programs. Be sure that you are checking to see that you have the correct certifications depending on who you're collecting from. The certification that you use for general pickup does not apply if you're reaching out to multifamily apartments or condominiums. You need a different certification for that. If you're setting up a recycling center, there's training and certification, which is necessary for that as well. The DOR has a way to know by what's coming into your processor where those bottles and cans originated from. If they discover that you're collecting without the proper certification, they will shut you down immediately, which can put you into a not a favorable position with, for example, multifamilies and residents, as well as with your local government agency, that they're going to have to somehow step in and take care of that. So make sure you review these things. Let's see. Next slide, please. The e-waste is probably has the most things that you need to focus on. All of you guys are doing a great job. I'm always happy to hear when you get the surprise visits from DTSC that you've, passed it, or you've just simply have a little bit of things that you need to shore up. It's really good. You guys are doing a great job with this because there is a lot to pay attention to. Again, you know about the notice of intent that you have to file with at least 30 days or more before a scheduled drop-off event. The terminology is very clear with curbside collection as opposed to drop-off event. And you want to keep track of that information, the amount that you're collecting at each of those events in-house on an Excel sheet, the date and the location and the amount that you collected, and also making sure you go back into CEWIS the subsequent quarter to get the actual weights on those things on the CEW on your covered electronic waste. The reason you want to do that is in March, you need to file the annual report, and they will ask you to delineate between the drop-off events and the curbsides. You don't want to have to recreate all that after years worth of activity. So make sure you're tracking it internally. The the CEWS site is the one that is required that if you have a person listed in there as a contact, you must change that listing within 10 days after they've left your core. They will, if they know or find out, then they can get a little bit testy about that. There are some developments and changes within the program. Very soon, there's going to be a new covered electronic waste, which are electronics which have batteries that are embedded into them. This is different than like laptops, which may have batteries embedded into them. These are ones that cannot be easily removed by the owner. So how you find out about this stuff, if you aren't already, please do sign up for the listservs. They give you the announcements on program developments, and also for some of the other programs, trainings, and for the tires, and trainings or information about the reporting which is necessary. There's also an annual report due to DTSC. That one's very simple. It reports on your notice of attempts, which you have on file in DTSC. Always, and even if you didn't have an event at an NOI that's on file, you still need to report that there was no event there. If you don't do that, then they say your report is not complete. And always make sure that you're only keeping one NOI on file for a particular site. So if you are having repeated drop-off events at a site, that initial filing of that NOI is good into perpetuity. So, okay, next slide. So there is the designated proof collector, DAC, and you must have a proof of designation or a POD issued by the local government at least 30 days prior to collection activity. Some of you take advantage of this. It really helps with your if you're doing drop-off events, and it really cuts down on the log form because you can file it all under one consolidated line. There is a person, Lynette, who heads that up. She is the expert in dealing with this. She will have able to assist your local government agency in issuing that. It's some people like to do it, other people don't. There is additional reporting with that. Of course, it's the state agency. Your local government agency needs to file a 303 report annually on what universal waste was collected in their jurisdiction. So your records are of what you've collected as far as universal waste needs to be reported to them so that they can report it up to DTSC. So if they've issued a POD, that's part of the requirements of them giving you that POD, that you're providing them with that data. Universal waste safety trainings, those are done every year. And there's even if you've And so if you've had somebody that's been trained, then they need to be retrained a year later. That's a requirement, keeping the records on that. DTSC will ask for those records when they come to your location. And more details for all of this on the e-waste is in the guide. Next slide, please. Waste tires. Tire hauling permits are required when more than 9 tires are hauled. You need to renew your tire hauler permit and surety bonds annually. Manifest, everyone should be doing online reporting now or using the Diversus app. Manifest must be completed when hauling tires using a permitted vehicle, regardless of the number of tires hauled. And we always tell you guys to avoid storing more than 499 tires on site at any time. There are specific requirements, insurance liabilities, that if you're going to store that many tires, even if it's just to bring them there and have them picked up by your contracted hauler the next day, you've still exceeded that capacity. So as you are manifesting it, you're going to show on the manifest that you bought it to your location, and that report eventually feeds into the tire enforcement group, and they're going to come back to you and say, why did you store that many tires? Because you're not permitted to do so. One thing that can help you with your tire collections is you are allowed, and this goes into the tire amnesty events. Anybody can haul 9 tires or less. So which means if your crews are out on the streets and they're in a non-permitted vehicle that's in your fleet and they see 2 or 3 tires or even up to 9, they can pick those up and bring them back to your location. They just need to make sure that they document exactly where they got those tires so that you can manifest them. This may help you guys in saying, having come back and say, hey, we found these tires there, and now you need to go out in a, permitted vehicle to go get them. That can save you guys time and money by doing that. Just make sure that everything's being tracked and documented correctly. Again, there's listserv notices. It tells you about the different trainings and keeps you update on things that are going on. Your manifest, your hard copy manifest need to be kept on file for 3 years. So, because those will be inspected when tire enforcement comes out to your location. And the hauler stickers must be visible on the permitted vehicles. Let's see, next slide, please. Picking up waste tires from private lands. It does require the tire project form. Your local enforcement agency person must be involved with that. They need to go out, they need to document, they need to take pictures. They fill out the first part of that form. If you do not have a local enforcement agency person in your environmental services department in that local government agency, then you need to contact the tire enforcement here or your grant manager here, and we will get you in touch with the tire enforcement person here at CalRecycle, who will send out the person from CalRecycle to go make an assessment. Tires that are illegally disposed or assumed to be illegally disposed on private property must have permission for you guys to clean it up. There are cases where the landowner has been storing the tires. In a lot of cases, the landowner is responsible for disposal of the tires. And if the local enforcement agency person or the tire enforcement person here from CalRecycle determines by physically going out there that those were illegally disposed tires, then it's possible after the form is filled out and goes through the system that you will receive approval to go pick them up. There's a few other nuances with that, and that you need to have a affidavit signed that you're given permission by the landowner to go pick up the tires. The local enforcement agency person also or works with that person, that property owner, to look at ways to remediate further illegal disposal. We encourage you to attend the tire conference. It's a great opportunity to learn more about what's going on in this whole area of tire disposal. The tire enforcement agency will inspect you without announcement many times, so be prepared. There are no collection for commercial tire generators, schools, or government agency fleet yards. They are totally responsible for disposing of their own tires. And review the program guide section on amnesty events. If persons show up with more than 10 tires, there's a process for that the local government agency may not be aware of. There's a form that you can fill out. What we are looking for there is tire shop owners that are trying to use this as an outlet to get rid of their tires, which again goes back to commercial tire generators. They cannot use amnesty events to do that. So if you have a homeowner that's not a tire shop owner and they bought in more, it's okay to accept those on that one time, but it's documented, and that information is sent to CalRecycle to track it, so that if they're doing it repeatedly, they will get a visit from CalRecycle to find out what's going on. Next slide, please. So here's your project review form. Just a reminder, this bottom cell, make sure you return the form to myself or your grant manager when the cleanup is completed. Include photos of the clean site. So you're going to list the date the cleanup was completed and the date the form was returned. The reason for this is I need to close the loop on these with the tire enforcement. They need to know that it was done, because they keep file, obviously, of these kind of things. Part of the purpose is if this is a reoccurring situation, they can know that, hey, we cleaned it up this time, and it's back. So they need to know that in order to address it. Let's see, anything else on this? Nope, just make sure the form is filled out completely. And on private lands, there is a site-specific TPID number, which will be issued. That should be done by the local enforcement agency person, or if CalRecycle, if there's not a LEA, then CalRecycle will issue that for you. But it should be on the form and filled out by either those two entities. Next slide. Used oil, as you guys have been doing a wonderful job with this. The list has decreased tremendously, mostly because of the shutdowns and closing of due to COVID. Some of you have majorly reduced lists. I've tried to expand those lists by giving you outlying areas that used to be on the 4-year cycle. I pulled those into the 2-year cycle. There are other activities that are allowable for expenditure under the fund. One of them is the Dock Walkers program. You do need to go to training for that. The training is good for 3 years. The website is in the guide. They only offer the trainings like the first quarter or first half of the year. So we do not, we ask that you do not send core members to that training, but only staff, and then you guys are then able to to train your core members to do the dog walking. It's a great opportunity for them to learn public speaking skills and engagement with the public. The other thing is stormwater drain labeling or decals. A couple of cores are involved with that. The North Bay Corps has done a huge amount in that area. So if you're interested in that, reach out to them and they can tell you how they've done it. Yeah, so that's it. You pretty much, guys, you can know that whole program. It's all there. Again, the used oil drop is on your literature. No freebie giveaways, except for you can also purchase the do-it-yourself kits and related materials, can be expensed to the oil fund only. We just ask you to be wise about the distribution of those materials. They should not be viewed as just a freebie giveaway, but should be part of educational process, and that the person is an actual DIY person or wants to start doing that. Handing out those kits without looking into that ends up with the things going into the trash. So we don't want to pay for that and have it end up not being used properly. If for some reason you have not been able to get through all of your reviews, there's a hard stop at the end of Q4. Do not carry over any reviews that were not completed from one cycle to the next in the gap period before you receive the new list for the next fiscal year. I will look at that. I change, if you're not able to do it, it's not a big deal. It just says you didn't you didn't make 100%. So, but most of you do, especially now that the list have been reduced. One of the most important things is when your core members go out to an Autoport store, and there's language within the training materials for this, which is part of the guide. Never, ever, ever say that you are there for an inspection or you're from the state. Auto parts stores have all kind of compliance things that they have to be aware of because of the large amount of chemicals that are in those locations. If you come in and say that the bells and whistles and alarms are going to go off, then it's happened in the past and they've called us and they were really ticked off that it appeared that they were about to have a surprise inspection. So please make sure your core members are following the script. Next slide, please. Again, listservs, I'm going to keep harping on that because there's a tremendous information there. General questions can go to the used oil CCC at calrecycle.ca.gov. And the signs are available. There was a shortage for a while. Somehow somebody made off with a whole bunch of them. So hopefully your orders have been filled now. But you can order those online in both English and Spanish. And that website is in the guide. If you're new to doing this, when you go to that website, it will ask you for a site ID number. You don't have one. Those are ID numbers for the auto parts stores. Just bypass that, and the folks that ship the signs will know that you're named core, that you can order 50 signs and no ID is required. And let's see, next page. I think I went over this last time, but some of you are still reporting or giving all the information on that Excel sheet. It can be a little onerous. So it's an either or situation, just to remind you, if they're in business, then you say yes, and was the sign posted, yes or no? If none was posted, did you leave the sign? And then you go to the far right to the sign of visibility, number 6 up here that you see at the top, and the program participation. Now, if the sign was posted, number 4, was it damaged? If it was damaged, did you leave a sign? So you're going to always report here, number 1, are they in business, yes or no? If it's no, then you're done with that line. If they're there and it was posted, then you answer 2 or 3. If the sign was damaged, you report number 4 and 5. Okay, so some of you are filling all of these out and you don't need to. It's an either 2 and 3 or it's 4 and 5. And then you report number 6 and number 7. So it just makes it easier for you guys to, instead of having to do all those pull downs on that Excel sheet. I'm open to any suggestions how to make that easier, but I've tried about 4 or 5 times now to try to shorten this up. So let's see. Next slide, please. Okay, I mentioned these, that there's educational outreach for use of the DIY kits, local government partnerships or your stormwater drains. There can be partnerships with the auto parts store to do oil filter exchange events where they offer vouchers for customers to come in, and there's a dock walkers program. And next slide, please. And that's it. I turn this back over to Derek.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, team. If you'd all come back on camera, so we can all show ourselves to everybody. And these are your contacts for the Local Conservation Corps Grant Program. And you can reach out to anybody here if your grant manager isn't here on a day, they're on a leave. You can always reach out to me or anybody else in the team. This session is recorded and we will be posting the video of it. So if you missed something and you want to go back and review, you'll have that opportunity. We'll also send out the PowerPoint deck to you as well. So we just want to open it up for questions in case there's any lingering questions out there. And
we do see a question from the LA Corps.
cool. What's
Hi,
that question?
Derek.
Uh-oh. I'm not hearing.
I'm sorry, I didn't unmute myself.
That's okay.
Question I had, are the terms and conditions in GMS, are they up to date?
Yes.
Okay, so this goes back to my original question then. In the terms and conditions to LLC1, it states that we won't get reimbursed for expenses incurred after April 1st. So, and I'll be honest, we were budgeting to plan and have expenses all the way through March 30th based on the terms and conditions.
Okay. Well, yeah. So this is being treated by accounting here as basically as a contract. That's why I've been putting out information consistently over the last year, reminding everybody that this is going to end on April 1st and that the invoice would be due on that date. So I'm sorry if there's some conflicting messaging there, but I've been very clear that the final invoice is due April 1st of 2026. And accounting's been very clear with me about that, which is why I've been putting that message out. So hopefully you can reorganize your budget somewhat to expend those BCRF funds through other activities that maybe were planned to be expensed to RLC, but this is a hard deadline for us. So, and we're not being given any wiggle room on it. So April 1st is our hard deadline for LCC1.
So Derek, if I might add to that, Robert, the the challenge is mostly has to do with your labor costs because it takes sometimes up to 30 days to get those documents together and to be able to be invoiced. So that could mean that your performance period for the labor is going to end by February, so that you have the month of March to get those records together. You can still incur other expenditures in March as long as those things can be documented and backups required to be submitted by April 1st.
Yeah, once I heard this from you, Derek, Juan sent out an email to our account. We're gonna meet and strategize about this. Our situation is it takes us a month and a half to close out a month, and invoices can't be generated in a vacuum. They have to be rolled up into the entire system. So probably we're going to be looking at a self-imposed performance period of end of January to give us enough time to have that invoice ready for you by April 1st.
Okay. Yeah, this one's a bit of a curveball. I understand that. And I don't have any flexibility to offer, unfortunately.
No, we'll figure it out.
Okay. Are there any other questions out there? Okay, well, thank you all for attending and have a great day. We'll look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.